Night settles over the airport like a heavy blanket, and the world feels colder than the air drifting through the automatic doors. A man sits alone near the far end of the terminal, a duffel bag beside him spilling the last scraps of a life that used to stand tall. This man is Grant Walker, a veteran with 20 years of service and scars no one can see. Beside him lies Duke, his loyal dog, pressed close, trying to keep them both warm. Grant stares ahead without blinking. His eyes carry the tired weight of someone who has given everything and received nothing in return. A few hours ago, he still had a home. A few hours ago, he still believed his late wife's family respected him. But his in-laws had made their intentions clear, play-acting sorrow just long enough to seize control of the house and shove him out of their lives. They had driven him to the airport, forced a smile, and told him he would be fine somewhere else. As the car rolled away, Grant felt Duke tense beside him, as if the dog understood the cruelty far better than the humans who caused it. Now, Grant sits on the freezing floor of the terminal, Duke resting his head on Grant's knee, both of them left behind and forgotten. The night crew moves around him. Workers sweep the floor, glancing at him with quiet sympathy, but no one steps closer. Travelers pass by, dragging suitcases, giving Grant that quick, sideways look people give when something touches their conscience, but they keep moving anyway. Grant understands. He has seen that look in war zones from civilians who wanted to help but feared stepping into danger. He never expected to see it back home. Grant reaches into his pocket, pulling out a faded photo. His wife Emily, smiling with Duke as a puppy. He had promised her he would protect her family after she passed. He never imagined her parents would twist that promise into a weapon. Duke shifts and lets out a soft whine. Grant gently strokes his fur. "We'll figure it out, buddy," he whispers with quiet strength. No fancy words. Just a survivor speaking to the only soul who never abandoned him. A sudden announcement echoes through the terminal. A late flight delay. A handful of passengers groan. Grant doesn't move. He has nowhere to go. No ticket, no destination, no plan. Just a cold floor, a dog, and a future that has evaporated into thin air. Then, something happens. A soft vibration in his jacket. His phone. Grant pulls it out, expecting nothing more than a spam message. But the screen glows with a name he never thought he'd see again. 19 missed calls. One new voicemail. His breath catches for the first time that night. Why would this person be calling him? Why now? Why after all these years of silence? Grant taps the screen. The message begins. A calm, firm voice speaks his name, and everything inside him tightens. The voice belongs to a man from his past, a man connected to something bigger than any moment in Grant's life, something no one else even knew about. Not his late wife's family. Not his neighbors. Not his in-laws who had just dumped him like garbage. Grant listens. Duke lifts his head, sensing the shift in his energy. The words flow out, steady, carrying the weight of something powerful, life-changing, a truth that feels unreal after the brutality of this day. Grant Walker has been named the sole beneficiary of an estate valued at $200 million. And the man in the voicemail says they urgently need to meet. Grant lowers the phone, staring at the dull airport floor. His world has fallen apart today. But now, something else is rising quietly beneath the rubble. He looks at Duke and whispers, "We're not done. Not even close." Grant thinks the worst is behind him, but the people who threw him away are about to discover what he's inheriting truly means, and they will not stay silent when they find out. The cold airport floor seeped into Grant's bones, a chilling reminder of his new reality. He sat frozen, the phone still glowing in his hand, its light a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped his life. Duke, his loyal companion, nudged his elbow, a warm grounding presence in the swirling vortex of confusion, fear, and something Grant hadn't dared to feel in months. Hope. The voicemail replayed in his mind, a relentless echo of disbelief, an estate. $200 million, a name he hadn't heard in years, and an urgent request to meet. Immediately, Grant slowly, painfully, pushed himself to his feet, his knees stiff and protesting. The world around him seemed to sharpen, the distant announcements louder, the air heavier with unspoken possibilities. Just moments ago, he was a man discarded, cast out by the only family he had left. Now, he was a link to a secret vast enough to rewrite his entire existence. He needed a quieter space to think, to breathe. He spotted a less crowded corner of the terminal and began to walk, Duke padding faithfully beside him, his trust unwavering. Finding a semblance of privacy, Grant took a deep breath and dialed the number from the voicemail. It rang only once before a smooth, authoritative voice answered. "Mr. Walker, we have been trying to reach you." The voice was calm, professional. "This is Attorney Michael Reeves. I represent the estate of Colonel James Halden. I assume you received my message." Grant's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles were white. Colonel Halden, the name hit him like a physical blow, a ghost from a past life, a commanding officer from his early service years, a man who led with a will of steel and a heart of gold, a mentor who had simply vanished from public life after his retirement. Grant's own voice was a quiet murmur, each word carefully chosen. I got your message, sir. But this has to be some kind of mistake. Colonel Halden barely knew me. Reeves's response was immediate, cutting through Grant's doubt with surgical precision. Colonel Halden knew you better than you think, Mr. Walker. His instructions were explicit. You are the sole beneficiary. He wanted no one else involved. A pause. Then, we must meet today. This cannot wait. The urgency in his tone was undeniable. Grant glanced down at Duke, whose ears twitched, sensing the tension radiating from him. The world was tilting on its axis. Where are you? Grant asked the question, hanging in the sterile airport air. A black sedan will pick you up at the main arrival area in 10 minutes, Reeves replied. Please, Mr. Walker, be ready. There are matters of security and privacy at play. The colonel had enemies, powerful ones, who might take an interest in his estate. It is imperative that you do not discuss this with anyone. Enemies. The word landed heavily. Grant ended the call and let out a long, slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Security. Enemies. $200 million. Nothing added up. Why him? Why would Halden, a man he hadn't seen in over a decade, leave him that kind of legacy? Why the secrecy, and why the frantic rush? He bent down, scratching Duke behind the ears. The familiar, comforting ritual, a small anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Everything is changing, buddy, he whispered. I don't know how, but we're moving again. He slung his worn duffel bag over his shoulder and walked towards the automatic doors. The cold night air was a shock to his system as he stepped outside. Cars glided past in a blur of red and white lights, each one carrying people lost in their own stories, their own dramas. None of them knew. None of them could possibly guess that the man who had been sleeping on the terminal floor just 10 minutes ago was now walking toward destiny he never asked for, a life he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. And then he saw it, a sleek black sedan, its windows tinted to an impenetrable darkness, the engine humming a low, powerful tune. A driver in a crisp black suit stepped out, his movements precise and economical. He opened the rear door for Grant without a word, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Grant hesitated. Years of military instinct screamed caution, a blaring alarm in the back of his mind. But something else, something deeper, pushed him forward. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was the memory of Colonel Halden's steady voice guiding him through the worst battles of his youth. With a final decisive breath, Grant climbed inside. Duke, without a moment's hesitation, jumped in right after him. The door closed with a solid, definitive thud, sealing them in a cocoon of leather and silence. The car glided away from the curb, merging seamlessly into the river of lights flowing down the highway. As the city skyline began to recede behind him, the full weight of the day crashed down on Grant. Being thrown out by his wife's family, the indignity of sleeping on cold tile, 19 missed calls that had changed everything, a fortune waiting for him somewhere in the darkness ahead. He was leaving his old life behind, a life of struggle and heartache. But a new feeling began to stir within him, a subtle, creeping sense of unease, a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of his new, gilded reality. Because unknown to Grant, his in-laws were not done with him. Not by a long shot. They had already been sniffing around, asking questions, their greed a palpable force. Now, through a network of whispers and well-placed informants, someone else had discovered the truth about the inheritance. And Grant Walker, the man who thought his troubles were finally over, was about to learn a terrifying lesson. The greatest danger often comes from the people who smile at you the most. The battle for the Halden estate had just begun, and Grant was standing unprepared, on the front lines. As the sedan glided through the quiet streets, the airport's glow receded into the rearview mirror. Grant sat bolt upright, every one of his instincts screaming. At his feet, Duke was curled into a ball, but his ears remained pricked, swiveling to catch every faint sound from inside and outside the moving car. Grant had survived far too many missions to ever let his guard down, especially when the world suddenly tilted on its axis like this. The driver had spoken only once, a clipped, professional tone breaking the silence. "We will arrive shortly, Mr. Walker." Then, nothing. The silence returned, heavy and strange, pressing in on all sides. Grant stared out the window, watching the streetlights streak past like thin, fleeting lines of memory. His thoughts drifted back to Colonel Halden. The man had pushed him harder than any other commanding officer, drilling into him a level of discipline and awareness that bordered on paranoia. He remembered Halden's words, spoken late one night in a dusty tent halfway across the world. Every soldier carries a hidden chapter, a part of their story that only opens when life least expects it. Grant wondered if this night, this strange, silent drive, was that chapter finally opening for him. But far behind the sleek black sedan, something else was moving. A white compact car, weaving expertly through the sparse late-night traffic. Inside, Emily's parents, Lydia and Charles, were anything but grieving in-laws. They looked more like hunters who had finally caught the scent of their prey. The transformation had been swift, merciless. Earlier that evening, Lydia had received a call from a distant relative, someone who worked a menial job near the county courthouse. This relative, seeking a bit of gossip, had overheard a name, Halden, and then another name, accidentally mentioned in the same breath, Grant Walker. The name was tied to an estate, an inheritance so vast it seemed impossible, like a number from a dream. $200 million. The words had struck Lydia like a bolt of lightning. In that instant, every ounce of the feigned sympathy she had performed for Grant earlier simply evaporated. A new emotion took its place. Greed. It was sharp, heavy, and utterly blinding. Now, her knuckles were white as she gripped the steering wheel, her voice a low hiss that cut through the car's interior. He tricked us, Charles. He played the grieving widower, and we kicked him out. Now he's on his way to claim some secret fortune. Do you have any idea what people will think of us? They'll laugh at us. We have to get ahead of this. We have to stop him before he takes everything that should be Emma's legacy, our family's legacy. Charles, ever the one to appear calm, tried to soothe her, but a frantic dance of fear was visible in his own eyes. Men like Charles pretended to be level-headed until money was on the table. Then, their voices shook, their carefully laid plans became rushed and desperate, and their patience burned away like gasoline on a fire. Hidden behind their car's tinted glass, they shadowed the black sedan, maintaining a careful distance of 3 car lengths. Never too close to be seen, never too far to lose their target. Of course, Grant couldn't see them. He had no idea they had already discovered the inheritance. He didn't know that the people he once considered family were now willing to bend any rule, shatter any moral compass, to seize control of a fortune they fervently believed was theirs by birthright. Inside his own car, Grant felt a profound sense of unease, a familiar prickle on the back of his neck. Years of combat had honed his intuition, training him to feel danger long before it showed its face. He glanced at the side mirror, then the rear view. Nothing looked out of place. A few cars back, standard traffic. But then Duke lifted his head from his paws and let out a low guttural growl. It was a sound Grant knew well, a sound reserved for when something familiar turned wrong, or when unseen strangers were tracking too close. "Easy, boy," Grant whispered, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the dog's head, but his other hand tightened its grip on the duffel bag at his side. The sedan began to slow, turning into the driveway of a modern, glass and steel office building. It was surrounded by tall, immaculately trimmed hedges, and the entrance glowed with a warm, golden light. It was designed to look peaceful, secure, safe, but Grant knew better. Safety was just a shape, a facade that danger often hid behind. The driver brought the car to a smooth stop, got out, and opened Grant's door, nodding toward the entrance. "Attorney Reeves is waiting for you upstairs." Grant stepped out onto the cool pavement, Duke immediately at his heel. The sedan pulled away without another word, its taillights disappearing around a corner, leaving him standing in the cold night air. Grant watched it go, an unsettling feeling growing in the empty space it left behind. He took a deep, steadying breath, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the brightly lit entrance. He was about to meet the man who held the keys to this entire mystery, the truth about Colonel Halden, about the staggering inheritance, and about the real reason this night felt like the beginning of something massive and life-altering. But just behind the manicured hedges, hidden in the deep shadows, the white compact car rolled to a silent stop. 2 figures sat inside, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard, watching, waiting, and planning. They were ready to force their way into a world they couldn't possibly understand. Driven by a greed that had already consumed them, Grant pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside, unaware of the eyes tracking his every move. What he was about to learn from the attorney in that sterile, quiet office was bigger, darker, and infinitely more personal than any inheritance. The lobby was quiet, bathed in a soft yellow light that gleamed off the polished floors. Grant entered, with Duke walking steadily beside him, his senses alert. At the far end, an elevator waited, its doors open, as if in silent invitation. Grant stepped inside, the metal box rising in silence. Each floor he passed feeling like another layer peeling away, separating his past from whatever truth awaited him above. The elevator stopped with a smooth, almost imperceptible jolt. The doors slid open to reveal a single, long hallway. At the very end of it stood a man in a dark suit. He was tall, calm, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Attorney Michael Reeves. He stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Walker, thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." Grant's handshake was light, a brief touch. He wasn't one for pleasantries. He simply nodded and waited for the man to continue. Reeves led him into a large office. Bookshelves stretched from the floor to the high ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. In the center of the room sat a single, imposing table, and on it, a sealed folder and a small metal box. Duke, ever watchful, sniffed the air cautiously before settling down right beside Grant's chair. A furry anchor in an unfamiliar sea, Reeves gestured for Grant to sit. Grant lowered himself into the chair, his muscles still coiled tight with a caution born from years of discipline. Reeves sat opposite him, his posture calm but respectful. as if he understood he was in the presence of a man forged from discipline and pain. Colonel Halden, Reeves began, his voice measured, did not share much about his personal affairs with anyone. For years, he kept a quiet life and trusted only a handful of people, but he kept detailed records of a private fund he built using investments, land, and classified compensation from operations your team carried out long ago. He left everything to you and your dog, specifically by name, no one else. Grant looked down, trying to steady the tremor that ran through him. Halden the colonel had always been distant, but brutally honest. He had pushed Grant past his breaking points, time and time again. Maybe the colonel saw something deeper in him than Grant ever saw in himself. Still, nothing could explain the sheer magnitude of this. Reeves, noticing the weight that had settled on Grant's face, continued with that same measured calm. The colonel believed you represented a kind of loyalty that can stand against greed. He wrote that in his final letter. He trusted no one else with this. Reeves opened the sealed folder and slid a document across the polished table. Grant stared at the paper. No periods, no commas, no fancy punctuation. Just stark words and numbers arranged in official, unforgiving lines. 200 million, listed without symbols, without fanfare. Everything, under his name. Reeves then opened the small metal box. Inside lay a worn military badge and a handwritten note. Grant lifted the badge, a jolt of recognition hitting him instantly. It was Halden's personal emblem from their old unit, a symbol of honor, duty, and sacrifice. A lifetime of memories flooded back in an instant. He unfolded the note, reading Halden's familiar, sharp handwriting. The words felt like they were echoing through the quiet room, a voice from the past speaking directly to him. You carried the weight of others without complaint. Now, carry your own life with strength. Use this for good. Protect the loyal, ignore the wolves. Grant breathed out slowly, a long shuddering breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Duke pressed his head against his leg, sensing the seismic shift happening inside him. Something old and long buried began to rise from within. It wasn't pride, and it certainly wasn't greed. It was purpose, a clear, sharp sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Reeves watched him quietly, letting the moment settle. There is more, he said, his voice bringing Grant back to the present. This estate will draw attention. Some may try to claim a part of it. Some may try to manipulate you. The colonel prepared warnings for that as well. Grant's mind flashed back instantly to his in-laws. Their cold, judging eyes. The sudden syrupy change in their tone after Emily was gone. The way they treated Duke like an inconvenience, an unwanted remnant of a life they wanted to erase. The way they had pushed him out of the home he had built for his wife, their daughter, the wolves. Halden had known he had seen them for what they were. Grant finally understood. This wasn't just money. It was armor, it was a weapon, and Halden had just handed him the means to not only protect himself, but to fight back. A cold resolve began to settle in Grant's heart, replacing the grief and uncertainty. The game had changed, and he was ready to play. Reeves continued, his voice low and serious. You must be very careful, Mr. Walker. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Grant's. The colonel, your grandfather, was a man who planned for every possibility. He believed, and I have to agree, that people close to you, people you might even trust, could react with extreme hostility once your inheritance became public knowledge. We're talking about a fortune that changes lives, and sometimes, it brings out the worst in people. Grant felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Hostility. From whom? The idea seemed preposterous. Yet the lawyer's words echoed the strange, unsettling events of the past few days. The sudden, cryptic phone calls from numbers he didn't recognize. The palpable sense of urgency from everyone involved, and that feeling on the highway. That chilling sensation of being watched, of being hunted. Even Duke had sensed it, his low growl a constant, nervous hum in the car. It wasn't just paranoia. Reeves opened a sleek, leather-bound folder on the desk. Your grandfather left very specific, very clear instructions with me. My primary duty is to secure your safety and your assets. Immediately, we have a secure location prepared. It's private, comfortable, and most importantly, completely off the grid. The plan is to relocate you and your dog there tonight. If you agree, Grant sat back in the plush leather chair, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to connect, forming a picture he didn't like. This wasn't just about inheriting money. It was about surviving it. He looked down at his hands, then up at Reeves, a new resolve hardening in his eyes. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but filled with a strength he hadn't realized he possessed. We'll follow your plan, Mr. Reeves, but let's be clear about one thing. He paused, making sure the lawyer understood. We are not running, and we are not hiding, not anymore. Whatever is coming, we face it. But we do it on our terms. Outside the stately office building, shrouded in the deepening twilight, a pair of headlights flashed once. A brief, predatory glint in the darkness. A white compact car, barely visible, crept forward through the meticulously trimmed hedges, its engine a low, menacing purr. Inside the car, two silhouettes watched the lighted windows of the law office with burning, focused eyes. They were patient, like spiders in a web, waiting for their moment. Grant, inside, couldn't see them. He couldn't know that the danger he was just beginning to comprehend was not a distant threat, but was already here, parked just a few yards away. As Grant stood up, ready to leave with the attorney and step into his new, uncertain future, the heavy oak door to the office waiting room suddenly burst open. It wasn't a gentle entry. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet space. Someone was forcing their way in, their silhouette framed against the hallway light. The night, which was supposed to be about a quiet escape, was instantly transformed. A confrontation was upon them, one that Grant could no longer ignore or run from. The threat had just kicked down the door. Reeves carefully gathered the documents, placing them back into the sealed folder. Grant rose from his chair, stretching stiff muscles that had been coiled with tension for too long. Beside him, Duke stood at attention, his ears tilted toward the window, as if hearing footsteps no one else could. Grant noticed, and his instincts sharpened like a blade pulled from its sheath. Reeves moved toward the door, his voice low and steady. "We should move quickly, Mr. Walker. I have a secure vehicle waiting under the building. No one will be able to trace you from there." Grant nodded. He trusted Reeves enough to move, but not enough to drop his guard. A soldier knows safety is never promised, only earned. They stepped into the hallway, Duke walking between them, a silent, furry guardian. The elevator stood open at the far end, waiting for them, but as they started moving, Grant suddenly stopped. Duke let out a low warning growl. It was a certain sound, a sound Grant had learned to trust implicitly. He turned his head toward the line of windows that ran the length of the hallway. Across the street, a white compact car sat partially hidden in the shadow of a hedge. He could see two silhouettes inside. He couldn't make out their faces, but he knew the shape, he knew the posture, and he knew the selfish fear that drove their actions. Reeves noticed the sudden tension in Grant's stance. "Is something wrong?" Grant answered under his breath, his eyes fixed on the car. "They followed us, and they are not here to apologize." Reeves's eyes widened with realization. "Your in-laws, they already learned about the inheritance." Grant nodded grimly. He didn't know how much they knew, but their presence here meant they knew enough to chase money they didn't deserve. Before they could reach the elevator, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Heavy, rushed, determined. The sound of desperation. Grant snapped into soldier mode. "Reeves, stay behind me." "Duke, heel." The stairwell door slammed open with a bang that reverberated through the quiet hallway. Lydia burst through first, her face a mask of anger and entitlement. Her husband, Charles, stumbled behind her, struggling to keep pace, his own features a mix of greed and weakness. Grant stepped forward, positioning himself as a calm but unmovable barrier. His voice was level, carrying no threat, only a firm finality. "You shouldn't be here." Lydia threw out her arm, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at him. "How dare you hide from us? After everything we gave you, after opening our home to you, you repay us by stealing from our family." Grant stared at her, his gaze unwavering. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't step back. He simply answered, the truth a shield against her fury. "I stole nothing. Your daughter trusted me. Halden trusted me. And you threw me out like trash before knowing anything." Lydia's eyes flashed with a wild fury. Duke growled again, a deeper, more serious rumble this time, as he positioned himself between Grant and the advancing couple. Charles, ever the weaker of the two, tried to soften their approach, but the greed in his voice cracked through every carefully chosen word. "Grant, we just want to talk. If there's money involved, we deserve a share. Emma was our blood. You married into this family, so whatever comes to you, comes to us too." Just then, Reeves stepped forward. His professional demeanor, now a cold, precise weapon. His voice cut through the charged atmosphere like a razor. "That is incorrect. Colonel Halden's estate belongs solely to Mr. Walker. And any attempt to force access or manipulate him will be recorded as harassment and coercion." Lydia glared at the lawyer, her contempt palpable. "Who are you to speak for him? You're just a lawyer." Reeves didn't even blink. "I am the man who knows exactly how much trouble you are walking into. Leave now, or you will be removed." Lydia let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You really think we're scared of you? He owes us. We took him in. We fed him. We gave him a home." The words were like daggers, but Grant was no stranger to pain. He stepped forward again, his voice quiet but sharp, each word landing with surgical precision. "You didn't give me a home. Emma gave me a home, and when she died, you used your grief as a weapon. I have no debt to you." Enraged, Lydia lunged forward, trying to push past Duke. The dog's reaction was instantaneous. He snarled, baring his teeth, the sound echoing in the narrow hall. Everyone froze. Even Lydia, in her blind rage, took a startled step back. Grant gently pulled Duke by his collar. "Easy, boy." But the moment was enough. In that brief, terrifying flash, Grant saw clearly what they had become. They weren't grieving parents. They weren't broken in-laws. They were just people, willing to crush anyone who stood between them and a fortune. Reeves lowered his voice, speaking urgently to Grant. "We need to leave." Now, Grant nodded. He turned away from Lydia and Charles. He wasn't running, he wasn't hiding. He was simply done with them. But Lydia wasn't done. As Grant reached the elevator, her voice, shrill and full of venom, echoed down the hall. "You will regret this. This is not over. Grant, we will get what is ours." The elevator doors slid closed, silencing her threats. Grant looked at his reflection in the polished metal. He saw the tired veteran, weary of fighting battles he never sought. He saw the loyal dog at his side, a steadfast companion in a world of betrayal. He felt the impossible weight of $200 million. And he could sense the storm forming behind him, a storm of greed and desperation. Grant had escaped the initial confrontation, but a dangerous plan was already forming in the minds of his in-laws. Their next move would cross a line from which there would be no coming back. The battle for the inheritance had just begun. Hey, do you think getting a huge inheritance would solve all your problems? What if it created even bigger ones? Let us dive into a story where a massive fortune turns family into foes and unveils a secret mission. The elevator glides downward, carrying Grant, Duke, and Attorney Reeves away from the heated confrontation above. Grant keeps his hand gently on Duke's back, feeling the dog's steady breathing. The world is shifting fast, and Grant knows that when desperate people get a taste of wealth, they don't back down. They sharpen their claws. Reeves watches Grant closely, his tone calm but edged with concern. "They won't stop, Mr. Walker. People like that see money as oxygen. When they think someone is taking it from them, they lose all control." Grant nods. He knows this truth better than most. In war, soldiers fought for survival. Back home, people fight for greed. The second fight is often more dangerous. The elevator doors open into a dimly lit underground parking area. A large black SUV waits, engine running. As the driver opens the door, Grant turns to Reeves. "What happens now?" Reeves replies, "We move you to a secure location. You'll have time to think without interference. You'll also gain access to the Colonel's final instructions." He left more than money. He left missions and warnings. Grant processes this. Halden always believed a man needed a mission. Maybe this inheritance wasn't a gift, but a responsibility. He climbs into the SUV with Duke, and they disappear into the night. Meanwhile, high above, Grant's in-laws are fuming. Lydia paces, her breath sharp and angry. "We can't let him leave with everything. There must be a way to challenge it, to force him to share." Charles, her husband, sighs, knowing court battles are long and expensive. But greed has changed Lydia's eyes into something cold and unrecognizable. "Listen to me," she hisses, grabbing his arm. "If we let him walk away, we lose everything. Our house, our future, our reputation. We have to act now, before he locks it all down with lawyers." Charles shakes his head. "What can we even do?" Lydia stares at the building's entrance, a dangerous plan forming. "We follow him," she whispers. "We find where he's staying. We make him understand he owes us. We remind him that Emma would have wanted us taken care of." Charles's eyes widen. "Lydia, this isn't right. We could get in trouble." She snaps back. "We're already in trouble. He's leaving us behind. We must take what's ours. By force, if we have to." Even Charles recoils at that, but Lydia's mind is made up. She slides into the driver's seat of their white compact car, and Charles reluctantly joins her. They pull away from the curb, blending into the late-night traffic, with no idea where they're going or how dangerous this road will become. But they're in motion, and they're not stopping. As the SUV carries Grant far from the city, Duke rests his head in his lap, sensing the quiet intensity. Reeves flips through documents on a tablet, preparing for the next steps. Grant looks out at the vast, dark sky. Tonight, he lost a home, found a secret, and inherited a fortune. But tonight is also the beginning of a threat he never asked for. The road ahead looks calm, but calm roads often lead to storms. Grant can feel one forming, and he knows this time, it won't be fought on a battlefield. It will be fought in the shadows of greed. When Grant finally reaches the secure location, what he finds waiting there reveals that Colonel Halden planned far more for him than just an inheritance. The truth connects to a past mission that was never truly closed, a mission that's about to be reactivated, whether Grant is ready or not. What do you think is in the Colonel's final instructions? Will Grant's in-laws catch up to him? And what will they do if they find him? This story is just getting started, and the stakes are higher than ever. If you love thrillers full of suspense, family drama, and hidden secrets, you won't want to miss what happens next. The SUV veered off the main road, its tires crunching over gravel as it plunged into a narrow path flanked by towering ancient trees. The night was growing deeper, more oppressive, and the headlights sliced through the inky blackness like silent, sharp blades. Inside, Grant sat perfectly still, his body a rigid line of tension. His dog, Duke, was a warm, solid weight against his leg. But the canine was just as alert, his ears swiveling to catch every faint sound from the surrounding woods. Grant knew that a safe place was never truly safe until it was proven to be. The promise of security was just a word, a theory waiting to be tested by reality. Reeves, the lawyer, finally looked up from his tablet, the device's glow casting an eerie light on his otherwise impassive face. "We are close," he announced, his voice low and steady. "This property also belonged to Colonel Halden. Aside from my firm and 2 retired, trusted officers, no one knows about its existence. You will be secure here." The vehicle slowed to a halt before a small, unassuming cabin, nearly swallowed by the thick branches of an old oak tree. It looked ordinary, almost derelict, but Grant wasn't fooled. Halden never did anything without a precise purpose. If this cabin, this specific location, was chosen, it had significance. It meant something. Grant stepped out, Duke immediately at his heels. The cold night air was a shock, biting at his exposed skin. The world here was utterly silent, a profound quiet broken only by the soft rustle of leaves stirred by an unseen breeze. The place felt remote, isolated, as if time itself had slowed to a crawl around this hidden clearing. It was a world away from the noise and chaos he'd just left behind. Reeves led him inside. The cabin's interior was Spartan, stripped down to the essentials. A simple wooden table stood in the center of the room, flanked by 2 chairs. A small, cold fireplace was built into one wall, and on top of a dusty desk sat a heavy, locked steel case. The air was thick with the scent of cedar, an old, lingering smoke, a smell Grant instantly recognized. It was the scent of a soldier's temporary refuge, a place used between missions, a momentary pause in a life of constant motion. Reeves gestured toward the steel case. "This contains the Colonel's final instructions. He left specific orders that only you should open it." He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "There is no key, only a fingerprint lock encoded with your service record." Grant took a steadying breath, his heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He stepped forward and placed his thumb on the scanner. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a soft click echoed in the silent room. The box was open. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay a thick folder, a small flash drive, and a sealed envelope. On the envelope, his name was written in Halden's sharp, unmistakable handwriting. Grant hadn't seen that script since his last deployment, just before everything went wrong. The sight of it hit him with an unexpected force, a jolt of memory and loss that tightened his chest. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the envelope first. Inside was a single sheet of paper. There was no greeting, no punctuation, no preamble, just Halden's raw, direct words. "Grant, if you are reading this, then the world has finally forced your hand. This inheritance is not a reward. It is a tool. Use it to protect what others cannot. Your loyalty was tested long ago. Now, it will be needed again. There are enemies watching. Do not ignore them." Duke, sensing the sudden shift in Grant's demeanor, nudged his leg, a low whine escaping his throat. The dog felt the weight of the message, the gravity settling over the room. Across the cabin, Reeves waited in perfect silence, a professional courtesy, allowing Grant the space to process the Colonel's posthumous command. With a deep sigh, Grant opened the folder next. The contents were a ghost from a past he had tried to bury. Photos, maps, names, faces he hadn't seen in over a decade. Faces from a mission that had been classified, sanitized, and buried under layers of official silence. A mission that had ended in betrayal, ambush, and death. A deep frown creased Grant's forehead. "Why?" he murmured, more to himself than to Reeves. "Why would Halden bring this up again?" That mission was closed. Every report was sealed. Reeves stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Colonel Halden believed that mission was never truly over. He invested his entire fortune preparing for this moment, the moment someone from that past resurfaced. His records show he believed you were the only one capable of handling the fallout. Grant's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He remembered it all with a searing clarity he could never escape. He remembered the mission's objective. He remembered the sudden, coordinated ambush. He remembered losing good men, friends, brothers in arms. And he remembered the traitor, the one who vanished without a trace, leaving them to die. Reeves continued, his words landing like hammer blows. "You weren't just chosen because of your loyalty, Grant. You were chosen because someone connected to that mission has reappeared. Recently, the Colonel believed they might come after the estate, or after you." Grant set the papers down slowly on the wooden table. The scattered pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Halden's sudden urgency, the massive unexpected inheritance, the cryptic warnings about unseen enemies, the bizarre, almost theatrical reappearance of his greedy the strange, prickling feeling he'd had for days, the feeling that someone else, besides them, was watching. Grant looked at Reeves, his eyes hard. "So the money is bait." Reeves gave a slow, deliberate nod. "In a way, yes, but it's also a weapon. Halden wanted you to have the resources to defend yourself, and to complete what he believed was left unfinished." Grant's gaze fell to the small flash drive lying next to the folder. The cold, heavy weight of responsibility settled onto his shoulders. This inheritance wasn't wealth, it was a burden, a mission, a visceral reminder that the past was not dead. It was clawing its way back into his life. But before Grant could voice any of this, Duke suddenly stiffened. Every muscle in his body went rigid. His ears perked, rotating like small radar dishes. He leaned forward, his weight shifting, and a soft, low growl rumbled deep in his chest. It was a sound of warning, certain, immediate. Reeves froze, his professional composure finally cracking. "What is it?" he whispered, his eyes wide. Ignoring the question, Grant moved silently toward the window, pulling back the edge of the curtain just enough to peer into the oppressive darkness outside. Between the dense, black silhouettes of the trees, something moved. It was slow, deliberate. This was not an animal, and it certainly wasn't his in-laws. He knew their careless, clumsy footsteps. This presence was different. This presence knew how to hide, how to stalk, how to wait. A shadow shifted, detaching itself from the trunk of a distant tree, a silhouette, watching the cabin. Watching them, Grant moved back from the window, his voice a low whisper that cut through the silence. "We're not alone." The past hadn't just resurfaced. It had followed him. It had found him. Someone from that long-buried mission was here, and their arrival was about to force Grant to finally confront the real reason Colonel Halden had chosen him above all others. The test had begun. Grant and Tucker hit the road again, leaving the city behind. This time, the destination was different. A small, quiet coastal town, a secret known only to a few old soldiers. The atmosphere in the car had shifted. It was softer, somehow heavier, filled with questions Grant had never dared to ask out loud. They rolled down the windows, and the salty air rushed in, carrying with it memories that began to rise like the tide. They arrived at a secluded house perched near the cliffs, a place that seemed untouched by time. The wooden boards were faded by the sun and sea. The porch swing creaked rhythmically in the wind. And yet, the entire place felt alive, breathing with history. Grant paused, taking a long, slow breath before walking toward the door. He pulled a small brass key from his pocket, its surface worn smooth from years of being carried, a silent companion to his thoughts. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room exhaled a story. The walls were a museum of a life photographs of soldiers, lined up shoulder to shoulder, their faces young, determined, fearless. Tucker sat quietly, a spectator to his own family's hidden history, watching his dad take it all in. Grant walked to a shelf and picked up a heavy metal box. It was vulnerability. Tucker's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Dad, why did you never tell anyone all of this?" Grant set the box down. "Because, son," he began, his voice steady, "I never wanted glory. I only wanted to finish my duty, do it right, and come home to raise a family in peace. That was the goal." He paused, looking out the window at the sea. "But when I came home, life became messy. People became messy. I thought if I stayed quiet, the world would just leave me be. I was too busy chasing status, chasing approval from people who didn't matter. Maria, her parents. They never understood you." He wandered deeper into the house, opening another door. Inside was a small workshop. Tools were arranged neatly on the walls, and on a long bench sat dozens of pieces of wood, each one carved into a tiny, intricate memorial. Every single one was engraved by hand with the names of soldiers lost. Grant had been carving for years, each piece a memory, a tribute, a promise that no one would fade away. Tucker's breath caught in his throat. "I never knew you did any of this." Grant's voice was tired but peaceful. "No one needed to know. The men I carved these for, they knew who they were." Looking around the dusty workshop, Tucker finally saw the true depth of the man he had so easily pushed aside. A wave of shame washed over him, but it was followed by a profound sense of awe. Without a word, he began helping his father. He dusted off the workshop, repaired broken picture frames, tightened loosened bolts. It was a quiet, shared task. But in that silence, healing began to happen. The letter revealed a story Grant himself had almost forgotten. He had saved the billionaire's son during a mission that everyone had deemed impossible. The billionaire wrote, "You risked everything for my family." Grant had never expected repayment. He had forgotten the letter entirely. But Tucker read it, and his hands trembled as he held the paper. Dad, you didn't inherit $200 million because of luck. The real gift was knowing my service meant something. But Tucker saw it differently. He finally understood. His father was never weak, never lesser, never someone to be discarded. Grant was a silent giant, a man of profound honor who had carried more than anyone knew. The setting sun painted the room in gold, and Tucker looked at his father with a new kind of respect, a respect born from truth. Dad, he said, his voice filled with conviction, we're rebuilding everything. Starting today. Grant smiled, a soft, tired smile. Are you sure you want to do that, son? It won't be easy. Tucker met his gaze without flinching. I don't need easy, I need right. The wind outside grew stronger, whistling around the old house, as if to announce that this was the true beginning of their second chance. A chance built on truth, not on assumptions and silence. But just as Grant and Tucker believed they had found clarity, just as the path forward seemed clear, the past sent a shockwave that threatened to shatter everything all over again. This time, it didn't arrive in a letter or a memory. It arrived with footsteps on the porch, footsteps at the door.